Welcome one and welcome all to the brand new Makem Takem podcast. We're here to give you a fresh look at British basketball, so whether you're on the bus, at your desk, or shall we say otherwise indisposed, you can tune in to Makem Takem every week. Each week we'll bring you news and views on British basketball, and to tip things off here in episode 1, we're going to solely focus on this weekend's BBL Cup Final in Birmingham. I'm Mark Mills, and joining me for today's forage into the deepest, darkest depths of the BBL is Seb Gigner.
Hi everyone, it's great to be here for the first podcast. Who knows what we'll talk about, but there's plenty to speak about, I guess, on the BBL Cup Final. It's great to be here, and I hope you're going to enjoy it too.
Brilliant, and I'm also joined by Nate Williams.
Pleasure to join you, Mark. How are you this evening?
Very, very good. Very excited to start on this new project. It should be exciting to see where it takes us. And without further ado, we're going to jump straight into things. We certainly have a different looking cup final this year. Two unlikely finalists in Worcester Wolves and Cheshire Phoenix. Seb, looking back across the cup so far this season, what's the game that's kind of stood out to you?
Well, there's only one really that you can mention, isn't there, I'd say, and that would be the BBL Cup quarter-final between the Newcastle Eagles and the Cheshire Phoenix, of course, finalists this year. And there was one man in particular who had such an impact, Orlan Jackman, who, of course, was with the Newcastle Eagles last year, coming back to haunt his former team with a buzzer beater. Cheshire scoring 13 straight points in Newcastle. I mean, that's really unheard of, isn't it? That's something you didn't expect to happen, and that really does sort of summarise what this Cheshire team has been about really this season. They never know when they're done, they never know when they're beaten, and I think that game sort of encapsulated that spirit that, well, I'd assume they're going to take into this final.
I think so. It was an interesting one, going down to the final buzzer beater play, and the inbound from Fab Flournoy being intercepted, and them scoring the winner, and the silence was probably one of the stark contrasts up in Newcastle that created. So, yeah, that's going to be a tough one to beat. Nate, have you got any highlights that you've seen in the Cup so far?
I mean, the London Lions get as far with knocking out Leicester Riders, and I'm actually looking forward to the final because it's the first time since 2004 I was looking at that the top two in the league aren't actually in the final, so I'm very much looking forward to that. Yeah, I was at the semi-finals, Cheshire versus London, and honestly I had my heart in my mouth because Cheshire had such a great lead in the first leg at home, and then they threw it away in the final quarter. But to come back the way they did, to go to the Copper Box and beat them on their home turf and get to the final, was an amazing turnaround, and they're real fighters in this final, so expect a dogfight in basketball.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's been quite exciting. I think I was looking back at the stats. It's the first time in something like 6 years where Newcastle haven't been in the final. Unbelievable run for them. But I think for the neutral, and I know you're not necessarily neutral, Nate, having grown up kind of finding your love for basketball through the Cheshire Jets. But for the neutral, this is an amazing final. And we'll discuss predictions later, but it doesn't help us trying to make any predictions. They've both secured their place in the final. But for Phoenix, it was a huge roller coaster. Saw off Bristol in the first round only by 3 points. Continued their run against Newcastle, as you said, with a buzzer beater in the quarter-final. Then overcoming that massive deficit in the semi-final. Just an unbelievable run. Nate, how much do you think that kind of fairy tale run is going to affect them on Sunday?
I think when I was speaking to Coach Thomas this week, he's just going to treat it like any other league game, and I think that's what they've got to do. Both sides are very small rosters. They've only got 9 players each, so and most of those from like the youth side of things. So we fill our roster with players from the Phoenix Juniors, and Worcester do the same with the university. So I think there's going to be pressure on both sides, and I think Coach Thomas hit the nail on the head when he said whoever deals with the pressure better will come out of the final as the winner.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Looking at the Wolves, like you said, they've had a bit of a different run to the final. Easy 21-point win over Manchester in the opening round before seeing off Glasgow in the quarterfinals, taking that one by 12. But I was kind of disappointed with their semi-final matchup. I was kind of excited to see Worcester go up against Sheffield and have a real kind of blood and guts fight for the final spot. But they kind of strolled it in the end, a 16-point aggregate win. Seb, for you, how important do you think it was that they were able to get a lead in their home leg of that semi-final and take 10 points into the second leg against Sheffield?
Well, it's always crucial, isn't it? Because it gives a team that psychological advantage going into the second leg, so you can go into their arena and say, hey, well, I've beaten you once, I can beat you again. And I guess that Worcester team, they made it look a little bit easy at times. Sheffield never really looked like they were capable of overturning the Wolves, and it sort of looked like the Wolves team from a couple of years ago that really was all-knowing and can beat anyone on any given night. And I think Cheshire would be right to be worried against a team that has been a bit of a force recently, at least in the last couple of months.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely set up beautifully from both sides. We're going to have a closer look at the Wolves roster now, but before we do that, I know, Seb, you were able to catch up with Worcester guard Elvisi Dusha earlier on in the week, and we're just going to give you a short snippet of that.
Going towards the BBL Cup Final, domestic cup competitions are always so special, but what would it mean to you personally and for Worcester and the local community if you were to win the first ever BBL Cup for the Worcester Wolves?
For the Worcester Wolves, it means, more than anything, they've never won the cup or nor been in the final, if I'm correct. So this is not just big for us guys as players, but this is very big for Worcester, the community, Worcester, the team, the fans, the crowd, the support they show us every day, not even games, just every day, the constant support. So it'll be really good to bring back some silverware back to Worcester. I think it's fully deserved. I think the coaching staff deserve it, the fans most definitely deserve it, and us guys as players, I think we deserve it too, just from how hard we've worked and how, from the little shaky start we had at the beginning up to now, where we're kind of a contender for, every silverware in the league. So I think that's really good. Personally, for me, it means a lot. Like as you said, I'm young, but I've been in this league for a while, so it's like, for me, it'll be very rewarding to be able to, say, okay, well, I've got, BBL Cup under my belt. I've got, unfortunately, last year in the trophy, we lost to Leicester, so, I've lost more than I've won in the BBL, so this will just be really, for me, it'll really help me boost and hopefully just allow other teams and coaches and people around this league and other leagues to just kind of see that maybe I'm not just a young British passport holder player just playing domestically. Maybe it could have potentially opened doors or something which I'd really like. But I think for me this is a lot. Like I've been waiting for the 28th for a very long time. Like obviously game by game, but the 28th it will be a very special day, and I believe we have what it takes to bring back the cup back to Worcester.
Okay, so if you want to hear the full 20-minute interview with Elvisi Dusha, you can just go to our website, makemtakem.co.uk, and you'll be able to listen to that. Seb, looking through the Worcester roster, for you, who really is their standout for them on Sunday's final?
Well, I think it'd be wrong of me to say that there's one particular standout, but if I did have to pick someone, I guess you can't really look past someone like Dallin Baczynski. Just sort of a commanding guy that you can rely on. He's been there for the team this season, but you've got outside threats too. Of course, you've got the emergence of Elvisi Dusha, who I was speaking to, and he was really excited to prove what he's about going into the final, and he's certainly improved his play a lot this season. He's been in the BBL a while, and I think this is the best he's been. And obviously you've got guys like Trayvon Palmer, Robert Gilchrist. There's plenty of weapons there that Cheshire are going to have to deal with. But I'd say if anyone's going to win the final, I'd probably say it's going to be Dallin Baczynski for Worcester.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got him down as a strong man. And for me, I think the big thing for Baczynski is going to be the matchup with Gettys. Can he contain Gettys?
I absolutely agree.
Can he contain Gettys? That's the key. When Cheshire have looked unstoppable, it's when the opposition haven't been able to contain Gettys inside the paint. For you, Nate, looking at the Worcester team, can you see any weaknesses?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head with there, Mark, with Gettys matching up with Baczynski, 2 7-footers. It's going to be a real battle of in the paint with them two. But I mean, the weaknesses. Probably, Seb, feel free to disagree with me on this, but they're probably a slow starting team. Like, I've been looking through the results, and even at their most recent game in Manchester, they were only up by 9 points after the first quarter, and then the lead started to build and build and build. Now, Cheshire are actually the opposite. They're quite quick starters, and I was at the Newcastle game on Sunday, and they were very quick on the break. But what Wolves, if they look at that game, their transition to defence Cheshire's transition to defence was not the best. I mean, Newcastle killed them with 3 passes on the break. So, it's going to be an even matchup, and I think that, if Cheshire can build up a big enough lead, they might be able to hold them off. But Wolves have a very strong capability of pulling leads back and then overtaking, and that's the danger for Cheshire, because they did it in the semi-final against London and they were very fortunate to turn it around in the second leg. So yeah, very interesting matchup and one I'm looking forward to.
I think the thing for me that I find interesting about the Worcester roster is how it's developed. There were concerns at the beginning of the season, and then you saw Jamel Kennedy leaving in kind of strange circumstances, and again Ashton Khan departing for new opportunities in Portugal. And I think people are like, is this the collapse of the team? If anything, it's been one of the positives of the team. They've brought in 2 new players in the shapes of Ojo and Gilchrist, which for me are a major upside compared to the players that have left. In particular, Ojo averaging 20 points per game straight away, and I think that will start to combat their slow starts. He's got the experience and he's got the scoring prowess to kind of change that. For me, I think Ojo's going to be critical that he is in, close to 20 points, if not more, if they're going to come away with a win on Sunday. But Worcester's team, it looks tasty, but you have to be honest, Cheshire have put together a very strong roster themselves. Before we get into a discussion, Seb also managed to catch up with the Phoenix guard Rob Sandoval, so we're just going to have a quick listen to a short piece of that interview.
Thank you for joining the podcast. I guess it's been a little bit of a difficult run right now for Cheshire, but going into the BBL Cup Final, Cup games are so special. How confident are you that Cheshire can overturn Worcester this weekend?
Yeah, well, first off, just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast. It's a great honor. I'm really excited for this Cup Final. I know we had a difficult loss to Worcester last time we played them, but we were down our captain. We've had some lingering injuries, so hoping we'll be 100% full force coming this Sunday for the BBL Cup Final.
And going to a place like the Barclaycard Arena in Birmingham, it's going to be a big crowd. Does that add a little bit to you, a bit of an excitement, a bit of energy to it that you're playing in front of such a big crowd and such a big TV audience?
Oh, definitely. I know for myself personally, I'll be really excited to play there. We've heard a lot about it, the arena, and how many people will be there. So I think it'll be a great atmosphere to play in, and everyone will be up for it on both sides. So I think it'll be a great time. It'll be a great game.
So that was just a quick snippet of the full, really interesting interview. If you want to hear the rest of it, it's also available on the website, so makemtakem.co.uk. Nate, you know the Phoenix roster quite well. Who do you see as the important pieces of their puzzle?
Well, Mark, like I say, when I was speaking to Coach Thomas this week, he said the important part of recruitment is they wanted to build a team around a big man, and they've got that in CJ Gettys, who was very credible. And Ben Thomas said to me when he saw CJ's name next to Rutgers, which is a credible college in the NCAA Division 1 over in New Jersey, they said they wanted to build the team around him, and they've got very fast guards. Olin Jackman obviously coming back from injury. He was rested at the Newcastle game, but he'll be an important part of their game in the final. And they've got some great outside shooters. They got May Thompson, Chris Riley did well on the stats on Sunday, and Rob Sandoval, who we just listened to, he's got a very good baseline jumper. So, and what's good about CJ Gettys is Ben Thomas said he wasn't the typical star player where he's always got to have the ball and he's always hogging it. If he gets double teamed, he will kick that ball out. So when that man is free on a double team, they've got an easy 3-pointer, and they're very good from beyond the arc.
Yeah, no, I was speaking to James Bryce, the GM at Cheshire, in the summer, and I've been involved with some recruitment for BBL teams in the past, and in previous seasons, in recent years, Cheshire really have had a revolving door, and he was kind of, we are not having that this season. We need some stability. We need players that know the league. And then you look down the list, Riley came across from Sheffield, Sandoval came across from Leeds, Jackman came across from Newcastle, May Thompson obviously made the move last year in season from Leicester to Cheshire. Cheshire. So they brought in players that know the league and complemented it with the likes of Gettys. The issue I think, with Gettys is his fitness looks pretty poor, and he doesn't look like, if Baczynski can get out and run, this might be where you can get Gettys out of the game, that he doesn't have that stamina to keep contributing throughout the game. From your side, Seb, who do you think within the Cheshire roster, who's kind of impressed you? Who's the guy to look at?
Well, of course, I mean, it'd be boring, I guess, now to keep mentioning CJ Geddes, but I think you have to give him a mention, don't you? Back-to-back Player of the Month awards in his first season in the BBL, it's not bad, is it? It really shows what he has been about as a player this season, but you have to look around the Cheshire team a bit more than that. They're a very cohesive unit, and they've got some good players, obviously. The veteran presence in Orland Jackman, everyone needs someone like that, but also, of course, you've got to mention someone like Rob Sandoval, Raheem Thompson bringing in the blocks as Malcolm Riley. They've got just as much firepower as Worcester, but I guess I'd say if anyone's going to make the difference there, I'd say, or at least on Sunday in the Cup Final, I'd say it might be Rob Sandoval. He is capable of providing the moment when a team needs one, perhaps a couple of outside shots, and who knows, he could have the decisive shot from 3-point range. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, no, Sandoval's definitely stepped up. He had a great first kind of pro season at Leeds Force last year, and made some waves, and it was clear that he was going to go to another BBL team in the summer, and he really has shown what he can do, particularly when he's got guys around him that can score. That's really key for him. That was one of the things he struggled at Leeds. It wasn't a high offensive team, and a guy like Sandoval, he wants to be able to dish the ball. You know, he's averaging 4.8 assists a game and 15 points a game. That's a great contribution from your point guard. So yeah, I have to agree with you. I think Sandoval's one to watch. But another interesting aspect of this year's finals got to be the coaching battle. You really couldn't get much more polar opposite coaches in Paul James at Worcester and Ben Thomas Cheshire. Coach James first played in the BBL back in first ever season of the league for the Leicester City Riders. Coaching career started in '97 for the Thames Valley Tigers, and he's been head coach at Worcester since 2009. In contrast, Coach Thomas, first year in coaching the professional domain. But what a year it's been. He has pointed one of the best supportive franchises back in the right direction after a few years of really not having any direction and where they're going. Nate, you know Coach Thomas very well. How's he going to approach Sunday's final? Pressure surely will play a part in it.
You say very well. I went to school with him and James Bryce, you know, so we go back a long way, and it's actually weird for me to watch the Cheshire bench because we were both taught at school by Mike Burton, who's the assistant coach at Cheshire. So it's funny to see Ben now ordering him around when he goes up to the table to argue technicals and stuff like that, and say, "Sit down, Mike," you know. So yeah, it's very funny. But yeah, I was speaking to Ben, and I was like saying, like, you know, we as kids, we went to the BBL Cup Final every year as Jets fans, and now he's the coach taking them onto the court, and he said to me that, like, he's not gonna think about that at all. It's just another court, another game, and he wants them to play fast, and he wants them to look for the extra pass, because one of Cheshire's weaknesses I noticed was that their passing is a bit sloppy. You know, they rush things and they are quick getting up on the court trying to catch people out on the break, but sometimes loose passes fly everywhere. And one time during the timeout on Sunday, he said, "Slow down, please. You know, just look for the extra pass. Look for the outside man if CJ's doubled." But yeah, they're gonna approach Sunday's final like a big occasion, but they're not going to let it get to their heads, and they're just going to push the ball and get a comfortable lead in front, and then just be wary of Worcester, because they will be coming at them like a train in the second half, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It must be such an exciting time for Coach Thomas. I don't think he would have picked at the beginning of the year that this would have been how the season had gone. They're obviously performing well and taking some big scalps in the league, and making it to the BBL Cup Final in his first season, full season as a BBL head coach is phenomenal. Seb, you managed to catch up with Coach James recently. How much do you think there is an advantage of him both playing and coaching in the big games in the BBL? How much will that play a part on Sunday?
Well, of course, Coach James has played in every big game there is to play in the BBL, and he's been a coach for pretty much every big game there is to play. He knows everything about the team, but that doesn't mean he and his team are unbeatable. He'll be wary, just as he should, about someone like Ben Thomas, who he might not know as well as a head coach as someone like Fab Flanoy, for example, in the league. That's going to be a bit of a difficult challenge for Coach James to combat, but he wants to win the BBL Cup for the Worcester Wolves as much as anyone else, because that's one thing they haven't quite achieved as a team, and I think they're sort of heading in the right direction. And hopefully, for them at least, from their perspective, Coach James, his team won't be hesitant against Cheshire, and they'll sort of take the opportunities when they have them.
I think it's definitely going to be an interesting aspect of Sunday's final is the coaching battle as anything else, and I think a lot of people will be watching it as well. I think there'll be an awful lot of neutrals looking, can the young pretender turn one over on the kind of old guard within the BBL. So I think there's an interesting battle to watch there. But for us, we're getting to the crunch end of the episode now, and you're going to have to put your reputations on the line very soon. But first, I need to know your thoughts on Sunday's game. Where's it going to be decided? Nate, what are your thoughts?
3 words, Mark. Second chance points. Cheshire gave away too many on Sunday. I feel that if CJ's not on his game with matching up against Bashinsky's going to get a lot of buckets inside the paint from offensive rebounds. And also, I noticed they weren't too quick jumping out on the perimeter shooter. And Alex Navajas, he's had a really good season. He's a good perimeter shooter, and he's going to punish them if they don't get out to him quick enough. So yeah, I think that's where the game is going to be won and lost. But I think it'll be a really interesting battle either way.
Yeah, what about you, Seb? What are your thoughts?
Well, as cliched as it might sound, I think the game's going to be decided in the final 5 minutes. I think it's going to be a close one, and I think it's going to be about whether the inexperienced players who are new to the BBL, for both Cheshire and Worcester, can deal with the pressure of a big crowd, a big TV audience. Because you've got guys like CJ Gettis and Rob Sandoval and Cheshire who are perhaps a bit new to this kind of environment, and it's the same with Worcester players as well. It's about whether these teams are going to play to their best when they're under that pressure. And I think Cheshire, that's why I think they might have an advantage this season, because obviously everyone's seen a Newcastle game from a couple of months back, and I was there to witness their incredible comeback against Leeds, forced from 17 down in the final 6 minutes. I think they've got what it takes to sort of compete later on, and Worcester will be hoping they can do the same. Yeah,
I think it's going to be a close one. I agree with you. I think it could be one of the classics, if I'm honest. It could get down to that last play of the game almost. I think for me, Worcester can lose the game in the battle of the bigs. So if Baczynski doesn't match up well with Gettis, and Gettis has free reign, I think that's how Worcester can lose the game. I don't think that's necessarily going to win them the game. And I agree with you. I think if the game is close, I think you'll see Cheshire maybe take a little bit more of a favourites role. I think they like that underdog. As long as they're in a game, you've seen it at the Newcastle game, they got the buzzer beater to go through. We've seen it, obviously, the London game, down by 13, but they chipped their way back into it. I think Cheshire become favourites in that kind of situation. But we're now getting to the decision point. Who have you guys got on Sunday? How many? Who's your MVP? I know this is a tough one, guys, for us. Episode 1, trying to build a reputation that we know what we're talking about on Makem Takem. So I'm going to take the bullet first. I think Cheshire will take this one by 5 points. I think the big guys from each team likely to cancel each other out. We've discussed it quite heavily. But I'm going to pick an outsider as my MVP. I think it's going to be Rob Sandoval. I really do. I think he's so critical to Cheshire and getting them going. A point guard that can score in transition, can score going to the bucket hard, can score from the perimeter, but also constantly has the heads up, the look for his teammates. It's going to be, he's the guy that stitches that team together. So for me, I think Sandoval's going to sneak the MVP, and Cheshire are going to walk away 5-point winners on Sunday. Seb, what's your thoughts? Who you got?
Well, it is such a tough one, isn't it? It's one of the toughest to predict this season, that's for sure. I'm going to have to agree with you, Mark, saying that I think Cheshire are just going to eke this out. I think they're going to win by 2 points, and I think it's going to be all on Jackman on the buzzer to win it. In terms of MVP, Rob Sandoval is certainly a good shout, but for the sake of being different, I will say it's going to be CJ Gettis. He's been so consistent this season, and I don't think a player can win back-to-back Player of the Months. In his first season in the BBL, I don't think he's going to shy away from the limelight, and I think he's going to impress on Sunday.
I think I know what we're going to hear from Nate now, because he doesn't want to lose some childhood friends. So, Nate, your reputation's on the line. Who you got?
Obviously, I'd love to see Ben Thomas and Brycey on the court with that trophy, but I think they need to use their speed and use their break to build up a good lead in the second half, and then just keep going. Don't settle on it. Don't relax. Just keep going, because Worcester will come back, and with people like Trayvon Palmer, Alex Navajas, and the big man Wyszynski, they're going to be causing trouble in the second half. So hopefully it goes down to the wire. I'm expecting it to go down to the wire too, and Cheshire to nick it by 4 points.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so on those career-ruining predictions from the first episode of Makem Takem, pretty much come to an end. I want to thank both Seb and Nate for joining me. Any final thoughts, guys?
Just look forward to a good final.
Well, exactly. I'll echo those thoughts, and I hope it's going to be a close one. I think we all expect it to be one.
Yeah, I think it could be a classic, and hopefully this is the first of many podcasts. Hope you guys at home have enjoyed us. Make sure you like us on Facebook at Makem Takem UK, and share this with all your British basketball obsessed friends. The more love that you share out there, the bigger the podcast can get, and the more we can do in the future with it. Big plans. We hope to bring you more coverage over the coming weeks. We've got some interesting special feature episodes coming up as well, so make sure you subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and also give us some love, share a review or a rating, as well as putting it on your social media channels. So thanks for joining us, and remember, as the great Abe Lemon said, there are really only two plays, Romeo and Juliet, and put the damn ball in the basket. See you guys soon.